According to McKinsey, optimizing the customer's journey leads to average revenue gains of 5 to 10% while reducing the cost by 15%. Research has also pointed out that customer experience is fast emerging as key differentiator for businesses, and customers are basing their purchases and repurchases decisions based on the experience they've had with the brand and the business. Hence, it is extremely important for brands to expand their knowledge base to cater to all. How do they do it? Well, we will know it today from our panelists, and I'm glad to have you all. Mr. Devdut Banerjee, Director, Axion; Suraj Shetty, Head of Customer Experience, KISH; Mr. Deepu KV, President, Head and Operations, Customer Service, Bajaj Alliance General Insurance; Mr. Dheeraj Kalra, who is the Senior Director Operations at Paisa Bazaar; and Mr. Nilesh Marathe, Sales Specialist Leader, India and SAARC at Avaya. Thank you everyone for joining me. The point of discussion for us today is leveraging data and knowledge to create great CX. But before we get into the topic, a very, rapid fire question for you all. I mean, do you remember, the days when you bought your car? And do you still remember the first salesman who sold you the car? We'd like to start with Mr. Banerjee. And what were the interaction that you had with him? Like any resemblance of when I ask you this rapid fire question out of nowhere, do you still remember your first salesman, who sold you the car?
Well, Anirban, I think you've put me in a bit of a spot, but I do remember this, and it's a very interesting anecdote. So, for people who are familiar with Bangalore, there's a place called Richmond Road, which is probably one of the busiest roads in all of Bangalore. And the car showroom where I bought my car was right on that, square. And I just learned driving and had this false sense of bravado that I could drive the car back from the showroom to my house, which was some 12, 13 kilometers away. But as soon as I was going to the showroom, I realized that traffic was like killing. It was more risky than, swimming with sharks in water. I don't remember anything about the experience because I was always thinking that how do I go back home with an intact car? But I do remember this one thing, that when the salesperson saw me in a state of dilemma, he kind of understood, having sold so many cars, probably there are people like me, more people like me. So he said, Mr. Banerjee, do you have a problem? Are you thinking of whether you can drive through this or not? We can give you a driver who will at least drop you to a reasonable distance where the traffic is a little lighter, and from there you can kind of carry on. Great. So I do remember that incident, and I do remember I was so thankful to that sales guy. And I don't remember his face, but I do remember this gesture, and I always
he collected some data and he provided you a personalized message. Mr. Suraj Shetty, do you still remember your first salesperson, the person who had sold you the car?
So to be honest, Anirban, I don't own a car. I just prefer Ola and Uber daily. So yes, but I would say if you ask me to place it in a different context, I do remember the salesman who sold me my first home. And if I recollect that instance, it was like I was new to a real estate purchase. I did not know anything about it. And instead of selling me everything available, usually I have seen real estate agents coming up and saying that, what is your budget, etc. But he did not go over that, asking budget and what I was looking for. He simply showed me the property first and then looked at my reaction, that whether I was impressed about the property or not. And I can make out that he was trying to show me everything around, and he was trying to see how my reaction is. And based on my reaction on whichever property I like, that's when he started explaining it, and then he came to my budget part. So the understanding the customer's reaction first and what are his likes and dislikes, that was the first preference that he gave, and that's what I liked about it.
Great, brilliant. Mr. Deepu, your answer to my rapid fire question, which may not be relevant, it seems, to everyone. But Mr. Deepu, your answer to it. Do you still remember the first salesman who sold you a car?
Yeah, I remember him. It was many years ago. And what I recollect now, is I hope I'm going for a drive, and I'm not getting taken for a ride. That's what I remember from so many days ago. But obviously, he did his job because I ended up buying the car.
Great, brilliant. Mr. Nilesh, your answer to this, do you still remember the salesman who sold you the first car?
Well, I don't remember the salesman who sold me the car, but I do remember the day very well. It was my first car, right? So, and
Yeah.
I remember the experience, the happiness when the deal happened and it says, yes, okay, this is it. And probably it was like not much of a rush those days. So he said, yeah, we will have the car ready by next week with the registrations and everything. So yeah, I remember the feeling.
Correct. Correct.
I don't remember the person, but yeah, I if you know what I mean, right? So
Absolutely. You remember
buying
the
your first
occasion,
car.
but not the person.
Correct.
Yeah. Mr. Dheeraj, your answer to this question. Do you still remember the salesperson who sold you your first car?
Yes, I clearly remember, not the name of the person though, but the story around it, because I remember obviously budget was an important thing. I was a few years into the job and I wanted to buy a car. I chose in my mind, an entry level car. And I remember meeting this guy, a very smart sales guy who knew his content well. And he was able to upsell me to the next hatchback. So that's what I remember. I really felt initially that, getting convinced through him and buying a next level car, which was out of my budget. But yeah, thanked him later on because it was a really good decision, because I stuck with the next 5-7 years.
Brilliant. Maybe next time I ask this question, I'll change it to, do you remember the last, Uber driver you drove with, or Ola driver that you drove with? And then we can have maybe more, funnier answers actually. But thank you everyone. The context was nothing but, the exercise we just did, it was just to set the context that today the salesperson is probably a bot or a window somewhere, your PC, or probably a pop-up in your app. But the experience, it still remains very important. And this brings me to my next question, which is again for all my panelists. What are the various critical points in a customer's journey according to you with respect to your brand? You'd like to start with Mr. Banerjee.
So I work, I'm with a consulting firm, so we work with various brands, generally into BFSI, and a lot into the financial inclusion segment. So customers who are not who are nascent in terms of digital maturity, that sort of a stage. So I think very, very interesting, thing that I remember is that about probably 10 or 12 years ago, I think I was with Citi and we were having a massive, reorganization, re-engineering sort of an exercise, where I think the theme was the fact that customer service is going to be the differentiator for the next decade and beyond. And the whole thought was that how do we kind of, enable the customers to access the bank in various ways, to the call center, etc. How do we make the branch visit more enjoyable, less taxing, and things like that. But see how much the paradigm has changed today. People actually are looking at shutting down branches and working on every remote channels, etc. When we talk of the deep rural customers or customers who are in terms of digital maturity still nascent, I mean, a tragedy of sorts is that I think a lot of work that we do, a lot of cutting edge work we do, is actually focused on the mass affluent segment. While in numbers, I think the segment that we are talking about are actually more. So, if you look at iconography, if you look at language, etc., everything is kind of focused on people who typically have some, exposure to the internet, to various apps, etc. And that's why I think the adoption rate, though it's increasing very well, but I think it could have been much better as such. So when we do a customer touch point analysis as such, or we map the customer journey, I think something very important that we practice is what is called the human-centered design, where we not only hear the customer, but we also see the customer. So essentially, it's very important to spend time with the customers to understand, one, barriers to take up anything, and two, motivations to take up anything. And these are things which you probably cannot do through a question answer session. You need to sit with the customer to understand these points. So, basically a combination of, sitting with the customer, understanding, doing testing, prototype probably, or generally even talking to the customer on how he or she leads their day to understand their preferences, etc., before straight away jumping into the journey. That, along with, backed with data, is I think what Axion generally believes in.
Correct. I'll come back to you to understand how you sit with the customer and what the mechanism is later, in this discussion. Mr. Shetty, your answer to this question, I mean, how do you, how, from Kish's point of view, how, what's the various critical points, in a customer's journey with respect to your organization?
So Anirban, so Kish being a fintech, we are focused on providing credit solutions to our customers, which ranges from a line of credit line, as well as personal loans, consumer durable loans, and buy now pay later services. And what we observed that it's not about how many types of loans that you give to the customer. It's about getting the right kind of loan to the customer when he's in need of it.
Correct.
So we lay a lot of emphasis on understanding what is the exact need of the customer, what kind of credit requirement he has. For example, a self-employed guy, whether he's looking for a loan to fulfill his medical bills or he's looking for a working capital loan. So in order to understand these needs, what we have done is throughout the loan journey, we have some questions for the customers which help us know the exact need of the customer. And also after repayment of the loan, we try to inquire with customer on what kind of other credit requirements he has. In addition to this, we also do regular surveys with our customers for different locations to understand how the requirement for a loan for credit changes from one location to another location. And this has immensely helped us target the right base of customers, the right credit product.
Great, brilliant. I'll again come back to you on how do you ensure that you are messaging to the correct person at the correct time, which is very critical to your business. Mr. Deepu, your answer to this question, I mean, various critical points in customer journey with respect to your brand.
Yeah. So Anirban, if you look at the insurance industry, the moment of truth is the claim process. See, that's the reason you buy insurance, right? So that when you are in trouble, the insurance company can, come to your aid. And I'll tell you, a couple of examples, by which, we try to revolutionize this. Let's take motor insurance, since you asked about the motor buying example.
Yeah.
And, typically, how would you, file a claim in case, you crashed your car? You would have to call up the insurance company. They would locate the nearest surveyor. He would come to the site of the crash, assess the damage, submit his report, and the whole process would kick in. We focused on minimizing customer effort. And, now it's a 2-click process. The customer just needs to take photographs. So there's no need to wait for a surveyor, and then upload them using our mobile app. And we have an AI engine, which will assess the images up to certain amounts and get back to the customer within 20 minutes. He gives his consent and the money is transferred. So what would take days and waiting earlier, has now been completely revolutionized. So we call it, motor OTS, motor on the spot. So clear, identification of the most critical need and a fundamental change to the entire value chain.
Great, brilliant. Mr. Dheeraj, your answer to this question, the various critical points, in customers' journey according to you with respect to your brand.
Yeah, so it will be the largest for the lending products in the country, and being in the forefront of the digital lending part, obviously, our website is one of the key touch points, and that's where it's a make or break for the customer, and that's where we keep working towards how to make it more and more robust. So the key thing that we do is that we work with our partners and try to digitize our journeys. Obviously, gone are the days, and we don't, where somebody will go to the customer's house and pick the document from the customer around his income and KYCs. Today we are able to do all this online, and the idea is to really disburse a loan to the customer within a few hours or a few days or a couple of days, and that's the whole idea. So the entire effort is to ensure that the website provides those journeys to the consumer, where he's got the more and more DIY kind of a tools where he does it himself. There are minimal physical interactions with the customer, if at all required in some extreme cases, and most of the stuff is done online in digitized manner, where customer gets that confidence that he's going through a journey wherein Paisa Bazaar has tied up with the bank partner, and where the loans of the card will get issued in no time in a very safe environment.
That's great, brilliant. The more we talk about taking the journey online, Nilesh, here is where I would like you to come into the conversation, and I think that's where your from Avaya Technologies' point of view, that's where it gets ticked on for you. How do you see these Indian challenges, and how are they different from the brands that you might be working elsewhere, say in America or Europe?
Yeah, sure, Anirban. We work across several customers across the globe, different industries, and so on and so forth, right? But last few years, I would say there is a significant difference in the way we see the customer interaction happening in India, right? Typically, about a decade back, we used to say, or everyone used to say that the new technology comes to India, let's say 2 or 3 years down the line, right? After it gets introduced in US or European market, more mature market per se. But in last few years, we have seen the trend changing, right? And it is not just a trend changing in adopting a new technology, but more about inventing the new things, doing a new way of doing things. Especially in the digital world, the startups ecosystem has really changed the game in Indian markets. And what we have seen is most of the times, the startups, they're born in cloud, right? They are born in digital era, and they like to things. They're adapting to the AI analytics, and they believe in developing things on their own, right? So I remember, still, why last 2 to 3 years, but every conversation, alternate conversations we have, most of these startups is like talking about the new technologies, let's say the knowledge management, the speech analytics coming in, and they say, hey, okay, you know what, I have the bunch of data scientists onboarded, on my payroll. I have done on not exactly to this extent, but I have done some things on their own. So what we have learned is in addressing these things is empowering the startups, right? This new technology, the new generations who wants to get things done on their own at their own pace to suit their own business. So what we have done is we have given them an open platform, right? So that's what we do. It's a different approach than what we do globally, but just idea is to help these organizations out, getting things done on their way, right, at their own pace and so on. So we give them the open platform, let them do stuff on their own. There are examples like the Flipkarts of the world, and the Swiggies and Paytms and PhonePays. They have created applications on top of our platform, and make our idea is to make it easier for them to create new things for their customers and go to market. So that's how I see the difference, what we do globally and in India, just to give my 2 cents.
Great. I'll come back to you to know more about this. But for now, Mr. Banerjee, you mentioned about Axion and how it pioneers into financial inclusions and cater to a very different target audience. But you mentioned a very interesting way of acquiring customer data. Can you shed some more light on it? I mean, like, what do you say? What do you mean when you say that it's direct interaction or at one-on-one interaction? Then what role can technology play here?
So I was more referring to the process of customer mapping during product development. There's a process called human-centered design. I'm sure most of you are aware of it. So I think the concept there is that data actually presents part of the truth. There are a lot of behavioral aspects which essentially get missed out if you only go by statistically valid and representative data. So for example, how does a customer navigate through the screen? How does a customer look at icons and understand icons or not? So Axion essentially believes that when we work with customers who have not seen a particular medium and it's new to them, it's also understand not only how they interact with that particular medium, but how their general behaviors are. So for example, at times you understand by looking at customers' day-to-day life, their behavior, etc., on how much is their exposure to technology, what will help them, etc. For example, if you're creating a financial product on a which is accessible on a personal device, you'd realize that when you go to most of rural households, then there's one device, one smartphone which is shared by the entire family. So you cannot have financially sensitive information given in that sense to those customers. So I'm saying looking beyond just what statistics tell you, what a call or a conversation would tell you, looking at their general behavior is very important when you're mapping out a process to get insights.
Correct. Thank you for giving this analysis. Mr. Shetty, your answer to this particular question that you said about it was more about personalized messaging and knowing who is in need of money and at what point. So how much of this communication is actually influenced by data? And what is the process of collecting that particular real-time actionable data?
Right. That's a nice question, Anirban. I would say 90% of our communications are data backed.
Okay.
And there are two things when it comes to communication. One is the language in which you are communicating, and second is are you communicating as per the customer's requirements and at the right time when he needs your communication. So when it comes to language, we serve pan-India customers who may be communicating in different languages. There would be a Bengali, Malayali, Tamil, Telugu, or Marathi customer. So sending all communications in English or Hindi won't work over there. So what we do is we always tag each and every communication that the customer has with us. So if the customer has a communication with the recovery executive, if he has a communication with the customer service executive, all these communications get tagged based on the language in which the communication was made from the customer. And this is known as the preferred language of the customer. And once we have the preferred language of the customer, every communication that the customer gets in future is it happens based only on that language. So if someone is tagged as Marathi, he will always receive Marathi languages. Of course, English is an additional message that he receives, but apart from English, if any message goes, it will be Marathi always. He won't get a Hindi message. This is the language part. That's how we collect data on to know which is the right language for a customer. And of course, there's a fallback option. If a customer has not communicated to us yet in any manner, then the state of the customer, that is which state the customer stays, that's how we determine the language. Secondly, coming to the content, we take a lot of data from customer in terms of surveys, which is, I would say, it is not a direct survey, it's an indirect survey. When the customer is applying for a loan, we ask for some information with respect to the preferences of the customer, like for what purpose is the customer taking the loan for. And if a customer is availing a small ticket loan, say 10 times, every time he mentions the purpose of the loan. And we try to be as specific as possible so that we exactly know what is the reason the customer is availing a loan for. So if it's a medical issue, and if a customer has availed a loan at least 5 times for a medical issue, then it makes more sense to offer him an insurance product in future, or also to offer him discounts or vouchers on medical bills, as well as other medical related services can be given to him. Similarly, if there is a self-employed guy who takes a lot of loan for business purpose, then it's necessary that he has a lot of working capital requirements. So accordingly, we keep speaking to customer. We take on-call service, as well as through the app, we collect information from customer based on their preferences, and then we design our offerings accordingly and communicate to them.
Correct. Great. Nilesh, can you come in here again? I mean, it's a very interesting part that he mentions. One of them is the multilingual interaction that happens in India. So as you were mentioning about India and across the globe, is this a challenge, or is this technologically, when you see this, is this unique to India? And how has been your experience of dealing with this challenge so far of multilingual interactions in India, Nilesh?
Well, yes, it was a challenge about, I would say, a few years back, but now the speech engine has evolved a lot. And speaking as a technology vendor, I can say that we do support 10 languages, Indian languages. There is not only the speech recognition perspective, but also the speech analytics and so on, other speech technologies, right? We do have deployments in India. So I would say that we have solved that particular problem to some extent. This is speech is a extremely popular area, I would say, among the businesses. I can say that with fair amount of confidence that the amount of businesses that are evaluating speech is humongous these days. There's a lot of interest and around speech, not only the speech bot as in the speech automation, but also the speech analytics, the real-time speech analytics. People want to know what's happening in the conversations, what has happened in the conversations, and also give that option. That is the analytics part, but also give option to the customers in terms of the speech bots are getting evaluated and also getting deployed. Large part of this different verticals and different businesses as well. So coming back to the languages, multilingual part, I think this problem has been addressed to some extent. I would say majority of the languages, like when I say 10 languages, is all 4 South Indian languages: Bengali, Marathi, Gujarati, Punjabi, and Hindi are among the supported languages, whether it's a speech automation or speech analytics and so on. So Yeah, I would say it's not a sales pitch, but there are some deployments in the regional languages that I have seen, and some are getting deployed as well. So I would say, in a nutshell, to some extent, to large extent, this problem has been addressed in the Indian context. Yeah.
Great. Coming to you, Mr. Deepu, I mean, is it more of a transformation for a brand like Bajaj Allianz General Insurance? Did the pandemic force you in some sort to look at new avenues of customer experience?
Well, Anirban, nobody had focused on the pandemic, but we had embarked on a digital transformation journey much in advance of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. COVID-19, as one of my friends put it, was a global unplanned, UAT, user acceptance test. You had to, suddenly, be there for customers.
Correct.
And we were ready. We were able to immediately, gravitate our customers from call centers to our digital assets, whether it was WhatsApp or AI-driven chatbot, mobile app, customer portal, so on and so forth. So we did not just survive the entire period, but we actually thrived through it. Overnight, we were able to, notch up our digital servicing to 80% of our footprint. And in fact, our customer grievances at that point of time, fell by a whopping 90%. So it just shows, that, we were ready. And now that, we are out of the pandemic, and then, we are now into normality, right? Nowadays, people are not wearing masks, and I think now the fear is gone. We are seeing, some of these changes, continuing to be permanent. So there is a hybrid model at work, in terms of work from home and work from office. Digital assets, have, come to the fore. Multilingual, the point that, some of my fellow panelists spoke about, in terms of, even customers being able to access services using multiple Indian languages, using digital assets, right? They're very much in vogue. We have a mobile app only in Indian languages, for farmers who avail of crop insurance from us. Our AI-driven chatbot customers can can converse with, in languages other than English. Our website is multilingual. So I think from all those perspectives, I think digital with an Indian twist is here to stay.
Great. Very nicely put, Mr. Deepu. Thank you. Mr. Dheeraj, Paisabazaar is one of the early movers into financial transactions and digital lending. Do you, see a behavioral change in Indian customers? Are they less anxious, maybe, while interacting with financial services online as they would be earlier?
Yes, I think last 2 years have been very, very different for all of us, the entire world. I would say with what we've seen in the pandemic. I would say that the entire drive to digitize or to move toward digitization has been obviously fast tracked across industries, not just BFSI or fintech. The entire thing got fast tracked for us also, and I think as consumers, as consumers also, while we consume different goods and services across the last 2 years, even we have got attuned to using a lot of digitized stuff, and therefore our behaviors have changed. So yeah, as far as our customers are concerned, I think there is a lot of instant gratification that the new age customer is demanding, and especially with the last 2 years of using a lot of digital tools and digital mediums to converse with various organizations, this need has only been has come to the forefront. In our case also, we've seen consumers where they want the entire thing to be digitized. They want their loans to be issued at the right time with the very specific timelines. They want to speak less with the physical mediums. They want to do stuff which is more do it yourself kind of a thing. And therefore, it's very important for platforms like us to do it first time right. Wherein we, in case of information from consumer when they come on and they land on our portal or getting them onto our journeys, it's important that we do it first time right and have lesser options to go back to the consumer, for the similar information, or to go back to the consumer with a different partner. For instance, in our case, it's very important that we pinpoint or advise a lender or a partner to the consumer in case he wants a loan. Because it's a very specific requirement, let's say a personal loan, where he wants the loan in a couple of days' time because there's a need for that. So it's important that you advise a certain partner which meets the financial status as well as the company or the place where the person is working, the kind of salary he's drawing, so that that partner is ready to give that loan to the consumer. So that match is very, very important, and you don't really get a second chance if you go make a mistake on the first time. So that's very important, and I think consumer their trust on the technology has increased drastically because they've been using it for a long time now, and they do demand that the infosec around that is very robust, because that trust is required. So once you are able to deliver the solution with that confidence, without any glitches, and giving that assurance to the consumer, and they're up for it. And that's the change we found in the consumer.
Did you staying with you, Mr. Kalra, did you implement newer technologies in this period that you are mentioning, and how was the reaction to it? Reaction both internally as well as externally, to reaction from your customers, as well as whenever you pitch into getting implement a new technology, it requires certain reshuffling and certain disrupting the existing system. So what was the, I won't say obstacle, but what was the reaction to implementation of new technologies?
So I think so while we were planning to we are a fintech platform, so we always had a roadmap towards adopting new technologies and doing stuff for our consumers. But I think, like I said, the pandemic ensured that we fast tracked that, and we work with a lot of partners. So obviously their readiness is also very, very important that we have to work with. But yes, we did adopt a lot of technologies during this time because it was actually the need of the hour. The entire BFSI industry was, I won't say BFSI, but actually banking industry was a lot dependent on a physical interaction with the consumer to take, let's say, physical documents pertaining to the salary slips and banking, the transactions and the bank statements and things like that. That was not possible really. Let's talk about 2020. It was not possible. So I think entire industry came to a grinding halt because of that. And their innovations came into the picture. Today we work with many partners to really launch pre-approved program, as we call it. So we work on certain data of consumers where the bank partner is very certain about offering a certain loan at a certain rate of interest to a customer, and it's a very seamless journey for that consumer. So very specific offers for the consumer in case they want a loan. Which partner, what is the loan rate of interest, what is the amount we can give it to you. They say a yes and the loan goes through very, very seamlessly. So those kind of programs we ran with the partners. We did things like chance of approval is what we call in our parlance. Like I said, the matching of the bank partner is very important. So one thing is to train your your experts with whom customer interacts, but sometimes obviously with so many bank policies, you fall short of advising the right way. So what we've done is that we've got all the bank policies in the back end, and we use AI to ensure that once the consumer gives us the information around himself or herself, then our expert is able to see the partner in a certain sequence, and therefore he exactly knows that the chance of getting a loan for a consumer is best with partner number 1 and then partner number 2. So now he's able to advise the right partner instead of really relying on his ability to retain the bank policies and therefore advising those things, which used to be the thing of the past. So yes, a lot of things. We also do stuff for our internal customers, which means our employees, for them to have a good conversation with the consumer in case we have things or information about a consumer in our database. You're able to tell the our advisor on the CRM that what is it that they can see, and to have a good conversation with the consumer, and they're able to advise the right thing based on the information we already have in the system.
Correct. Mr. Banerjee, we mentioned about multilingual aspects. Now, when an Axion headquarter it looks at implementation of technology, there's a very different look at it. But when you look at it from India, where you are dealing with so many languages, and it changes, say, every 100 kilometers from regional languages we have moved to dialects, what are the obstacles that you have faced while implementing new technologies, just with specific interest of providing better CX?
Yes, specifically talking about languages, I think while all my fellow panelists speak about the fact that there are multilingual solutions available, and I do agree. But I guess given the complexity, as you said, of dialects, I think there's still a substantial gap in this whole experience. So I mean, I was just recently looking at some of the SMSs that I got. So what happens is that typically all the words get transliterated, and sometimes when it's not even needed. I mean, you talk to anybody, I think people understand what is online payment, right? But you'll figure out a way to exactly find the literal translation for digital and literal translation for payment and send it to the customer, and the customer won't understand. So for example, we sent out something called Kramang Sankhya, which was account number, and nobody understood, so these sort of things. So I guess a lot of thought needs to be given. I guess we get very kicked about technology and the fact that we are able to reach to the customer, but the whole point that I think we were initially making, and I think that there are excellent examples on this panel of who have done this great work of actually, mapping each step, spending a lot of time in detail, looking at each and every touch point, each and every word that you're speaking to the customer, and seeing if the customer understands that and is able to reply to that. So it's very and more crucial for the rural context, because in a lot of cases the influencers or the people that they can help are sometimes not near them. So so that's why I think in the rural context it's very essential that you make a very simple sort of an interface, use language which is understandable, spend some time around that. That would be my take.
Correct. Great suggestions, Mr. Banerjee. Thank you. Mr. Shetty, your experience of implementing new technologies and new technologies to provide better CX and the obstacles that you have faced with it.
Yes. So, Anirban, I would say the basic obstacle that I have seen in the past, it's not an obstacle right now because they solved it, but even other companies may have it, especially startup. What happens is you have two options when it comes to technologies. Either you take all the services from one vendor, which would be under one umbrella. For example, Avaya would be providing all services like call, chat, email, everything under one umbrella. Or sometimes some companies have different services from different service providers. Like we have a Freshdesk CRM, then we have a haptic chat or something else. So when you have different service providers, it's we need to understand that what all integrations are required. Because for the employee, it's difficult that he needs to jump from one window to another window to get the information from customer, or sometimes he doesn't even know how to jump. He just needs to send an email and wait for 24 hours to get it resolved because he doesn't have access to information. Second is that even at the manager level, he will have to jump from one report to another report to get a consolidated view about the particular customer. So what we have done is we had different platforms for different services like chat, email, calling, etc. So we used API integration across all channels, so that today, if any customer calls us or approaches us through chat or email, the executive can see in one click at the same CRM platform. He can see everything about the customer, how many loans he has taken, what is his relationship, where is he coming from, how many interactions he has done through different channels. Everything is visible. So I think API integration is something that is very essential for businesses when they're using different platforms, and it's an ongoing journey. So daily you discover some information that is missing in the platform, and you need API integration to be done over there. And second, I would say when it comes to bots, when you're using a lot of bots like chatbot or email bot, the implementation is quick. You can go live fast, but bots are about learning. So every week, I would say you need to look at the data of the bot and see that you would say that 5,000 customers interacted with the bot, but how many customers have got a resolution you want? So it's necessary that you have a specific person dedicated for the bot, whose only job is to understand whether a customer is able to get resolution or he is just getting redirected to some other platform. So the chatbot is useless to me if a customer comes to the chatbot and after 10 minutes he tries to call the contact center. So it's very necessary to analyze the bots that we deploy. So that has been a major challenge, and I think the service providers can play a big role over here, wherein they can have a specialist who can guide the company on how to what is the conversion from the bots and how they can improve the conversion. Of course, we have these inputs from service providers, but these inputs are more technical in nature and not easily implementable. So we have our own person doing this analysis day in and day out.
Correct. I'll go to Nilesh, but before that, Mr. Deepu, your answer to this particular question. I mean, what are the obstacles that you have encountered while implementing new technologies or modern technologies to provide better CX?
Yeah, I'll broadly put it into three categories, Anirban. I think one is, I think they have to think rightly captured, while the multilingual journey has begun, but it's it's still a journey, right? Because we need to cover all the gaps, across the various dialects and of course, various assets. So clearly, I think that is one area. Initial challenges have been overcome because today it's of course available in multiple languages. But if it has to be as seamless as the one which is offered by default in English, then there's a significant area to be covered. So clearly, I think, that's one area.
Correct.
The second is Anirban, while we look at, the whole digital landscape, one thing which we need to understand is that the focus is not just on, digitizing the physical, but it is also on humanizing the digital, because customers, want to interact, with human beings, right? So how do you ensure that, bots mimic human beings, and give a human-like experience, to customers? That is the second one.
Correct.
The third is, in terms of adoption. See, what happens is, everybody wants, customers to adopt digital at scale. But then let's think of customers. When do they call you? They don't call you when they're happy, right? They call you when,
Right.
they're in trouble and they need help.
Absolutely.
So it's not just the efficiency of bots, but you also need to bring in, the empathy or the healing touch, that a human being can give. So
Correct.
there is a, middle path, which is assisted digital. How do you give the best of both, man and machine? So I think, these are three, areas, which we have overcome and which we will continue to be, areas of focus, in the foreseeable future.
Great. This brings, gives me the great way to go to Nilesh with so many problems that we have just mentioned. Nilesh, your view on the two specific problems that we have noticed so far from our panelists. One is simplification. How do you simplify the data and put it all together? And secondly, how do you get the healing touch? I mean, your answer to it, Nilesh.
Right. The answer was in a way covered in our earlier discussion to some extent by Mr. Banerjee, by Mr. Deepu as well. The one thing is the speech bot adoption, as I said, is on the rise and people want to deploy it. But the technology alone can do only so much, right? It needs to be picked up by the processes within the organization. The implementation of that technology matters a lot, and how well it is integrated. I think Mrs. Shetty also called out the API integration has to be well, right? So the data that exists in the organization, how seamlessly it is available to the bots and how easily it can be integrated, right? So it is not just the technology, but its implementation and the processes, integration of the processes within the organization matters a lot in the successful adoption and deployment of that particular technology. So having said that, what my experience has been by working with some of the organizations is the bots, whether it's a chatbot or speech bot, I think it has to be integrated with the agents, right, to provide the human touch. Though we do support the multiple languages, multilingual support is there, but there are different dialects, right? Marathi has so many flavors in Maharashtra, and so is Gujarati, and Hindi. God knows how many dialects are there of Hindi as well, right? So it will take time for the bots to really adopt to those dialects as well. Eventually, it will happen. But sometimes the key lies in the implementation. If the bot does not understand certain things, it needs to be backed up by the agent immediately, or the way you implement the bot. You fall back to the, let's say, DTMF, the old way of doing the self-service and so on, right? It needs to be combination. And even if, let's say, Hindi is a mature language or English is a mature language, but at times when people are calling, there is a background noise. They are probably traveling and then they're making a call. Sometimes it doesn't work. This is one aspect. Second aspect is looking at, people expect too much from a bot. For example, let's say they want to implement all the workflows on the bot. For example, let's say your address change. Now there are certain workflows that within the organizations that needs alphanumeric inputs, and forcing a bot to capture the alphanumeric inputs leads to a disaster, because the bots, it's very difficult to implement specifically speech to text, right? And with when the environment of the caller is not within your control, right? Caller could be, there are dialect issues, there are environmental issues, and so on and so forth. So how do you do that? It's like, then you have to bring in the alternate channels. For example, can I use the SMS? Can I use the other text-based channels to capture alphanumeric inputs on the live call, right? So that the bot does just the job of the voice identification, and you are relying on the alternate channels to capture the additional inputs, which is alphanumeric inputs. And so examples like this, or bringing in alternate channels, working with multimodal, I would say multimodal service, can help improve the efficiency of the bot in certain ways. Obviously, it needs to be backed by the agents to, I have seen some of the organizations, they say, you force people to do the self-service on the bot itself, right? That kind of leads to dissatisfactions and in a way disaster, right? So at the right point in time, you have to bring in the agents to bring in that human touch, and in order to make the whole thing successful. I would say, yeah.
Very nicely put, Nilesh. I have just 2 minutes left for this conversation, and so in 30 seconds, I would like, 30 seconds each, I would like to have the concluding remarks from each one of you. My question to you is very specific. We all have been talking a lot about CX, and it is well established that CX is important, and there is no shying away from it. But I would like to know from you, quickly, how is it that you are quantifying the value of CX? I mean, how do you calculate the ROI? Devdutt Banerjee, starting from you.
So two things. I think you gave the least time for the most complicated question. And secondly, I guess there are business leaders here. I work in the consulting field, so the business case is something that I should rather leave to them. But quickly, I think there are measures for sure. There's revenue, there is retention, there is cross-sell, and a host of other 8-10 items that you can look at. The point is that there are two ways to look at it. As Mr. Deepu said, and I think someone else also referred, I think you can straight away go into implementing something which is cutting off the human touch, but that might lead to disaster. That might make business sense. On the other hand, you can think something grand and big, which will probably not make business sense immediately, but will leave a legacy and create some unseen value for the organization. I'll hand it over to the business leaders now.
Correct. Mr. Shetty, your answer.
So I would say for any platform to calculate the ROI, we do look at the business numbers. That is the customers who have interacted with us, especially who have contacted the customer service team. What is the repeat business given by these customers? So especially if I would say we have a special tagging for this. What we do is whenever a customer approaches us, we rate the customer as whether the customer, how was the mood of the customer, whether the customer was irate or normal. And based on this, it's not about after resolution. Before giving the resolution, when he came to us, how was he? And if a customer was very irate at the time he approached the customer service, then we do track the repeat business given by these customers.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Deepu, your take on this, calculating ROI when it comes to CX?
I think there are three ways of doing it, Anirban. One is, like how Devdutt and the others mentioned, right? There are standard measures like retention, customer satisfaction, NPS, right? There are quite a few. The second is, intangible, which is to look at, software aspects, right? Like your brand and, so on and so forth. The third is, putting the intangible and the tangible ones together, right? You just see over a period of time, how are the, various overall metrics, moving northwards. So I guess that's a way in which you can, calibrate that measure.
Correct. Great. Well articulated. Mr. Dheeraj, your answer? I mean, how do you, the emphasis on ROI when it comes to CX?
Yeah, but talking about very tangible things, there are metrics available that we track and that clearly point out you deploy technology, then you can see the funnel improving. Really, if you have made a tangible, made an impact on the overall process flow side of it, the funnels do improve, the conversions do improve. That's one of the ways. Otherwise, I personally believe that this metric of number of products per customer for any organization, I think it's a good metric because if that is trending upwards and if you're seeing a customer owning more and more products of the same organization, that clearly shows that he's got this trust in the organization and he's hopefully got a good experience in buying one and therefore going to the second one. So I think that metric, which is more long term, it's not kind of a stuff that really needle doesn't move in a month's time, but over a longish time, over a year or so, you see this metric moving, then you're sure that your investments in CX is really giving you results.
Great. Ending with Mr. Nilesh, do you see the conversation when you are conversing with the brands moving or your clients, moving towards ROI now?
Yes, definitely. Any new initiatives has to be backed by the ROI, and those are important conversations we have to have with the customers as well, right? But there are like Mr. Deepu said, there are fairly established techniques or benchmarks that most people follow. There are customer from a CX, specifically from a CX perspective, the age old is the CSAT scores, but now people are looking at the customer value score, customer effort score, lifetime score, and so on and so forth. Right. My area of interest and where I help some of the customers is what happens. The easy to capture this scores, and then there are a lot of studies by analysts like Forrester and Gartner that ties up the CX to the revenue improvement revenue, and then the benchmark studies have been done, and so on and so forth. My area of interest lies is what happens after you capture the score, right? Let's say CSAT score, or customer effort score, value score, and so on and so forth. How do you handle the customer interactions after the score has been captured? When I have given a score, I'm not happy, and then the next time I'm interacting across some other channel, right? How do you handle that customers and treat and route those calls or sessions if the customers are digital channels or social channels? How do you handle and how do you treat those? I think there is a lot of the value needs to be unlocked in that area. Because everyone focuses on capturing the scores and so on, but what happens that how do you use that score to treat the customer for the next interaction, or is there a proactive measure that you can implement, right? So my interest, I would say, is more towards what happens after you capture the score and how you treat and then react and put a strategy. Either the proactive reach out or the treating the customer separately, differently, in order to basis the customer has given the score. So that's where I would say I'll put more focus on.
Thank you, Mr. Redut Banerjee, Mr. Suraj Shetty, Mr. Deepu Klivi, Mr. Dheeraj Kalra, Mr. Nilesh. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time. It was indeed a great pleasure for me to interact with you and learn from you all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anirban, and thank you, everyone.